seatbelt spot. There we go.
Hey, welcome back.
Welcome back.
Yeah, Monday Matters. We're going to continue on in what we tried last week and see how it goes.
Dive right back in. I just think it's a funny
verse.
coincidence that, 1 week after, we're still wearing the same shirts.
Well, and hat.
Yeah.
And actually, yeah. Don't tell people how the sausage is made. They won't eat it.
We left off in verse 8, right? So we're picking
So
up
we're
at
in
verse
James,
9.
the book of James, written by, everybody thinks it's the brother of Jesus. Everybody but you thinks it's the brother of Jesus that wrote this, the Apostle James. And we're going to pick up chapter 1, verse 9.
Chapter 1, verse 9. Awesome. Do you want to read or do you want me to?
Why don't you do it?
The brother in humble circumstances ought to take pride in his high position. But the one who is rich should take pride in his low position, because he will pass away like a wild flower. For the sun rises with scorching heat and withers the plant. Its blossom falls and its beauty is destroyed. In the same way, the rich man will fade away even while he goes about his business. I love it.
What do you do with that?
I love it because it smacks you right off the bat. It doesn't really get all flowery. It just says, humble circumstances, take pride in high position, which is a flip on the way the world works, right? And whoever's rich should take pride in their low position. It's just this complete reversal of the way that we think of things in the world. Because in our world today, and it's pretty much always been the case, if you got a lot of money, you're esteemed to be in a high position.
Sure.
But here it's just saying, nope. You got a lot of money, you're in a low position. Yeah. What does that mean?
Well, yeah, that's a great question, and I think a lot of times, okay, so we're probably as we look at this, we're probably not the poor people.
Oh no,
I've been a poor person in my life many times. It was funny. We when we were in Kansas City, we weren't poor by any means, but compared to our neighbors. They all had fancy cars and they had brand new cars. And I drove this beat up old Jeep. And so I'd pick up my kids from elementary school in this beat up old Jeep. And it was the only, probably normal car. And everything else was brand new, $80,000, car. And the parents were like pro football player, they're.
Yeah.
It was rich families.
They've got money. Yeah,
they had money, and I was poor.
Yeah,
compared.
And there's sort of this hidden, whether we vocalize it or not. There's sort of this belief that's deep down within us that if you are rich, you did something right.
Sure. Well, you did do something right, but
maybe you did,
financially.
maybe you didn't. Maybe your parents just gave you a lot of money.
Oh,
maybe you inherited it. So, but there's this assumption that you did something right. And you got to your place, and you deserve to be there. And God has blessed you. He's poured out those blessings. Yeah. I mean, we even see this with newcoming Christians, and I don't necessarily want to bring them up, but I'm going to. Like with Kanye, right? And Kanye is a lot of people's first touch with Christianity in a while. He comes to Jesus.
The rapper
Kanye West. And it's great. I love that he, is turning to Jesus, but he's talking about sort of with this assumption that, God gave me all this money and it's, and I'm chosen. And I don't want to, misparaphrase him, but if you go and you watch several of his interviews, it's sort of like this twisted, misheld belief that God has blessed me with a lot of money. And that is evidence that he has chosen me, that I am esteemed, that you should listen to what I say, that, sort of this equation of, blessing, rich, you're in a high position in God's kingdom and in the world. But here, James, that just completely throws it out, that in the spiritual hierarchy, if you're rich, if you have a lot of money, you're actually in a low position.
So years and years ago, when we were in Kansas City, there was a guy in the church who... he was a great guy, but he would tell people, I don't have any gifts. I can't preach. I can't sing. I can't teach. I can't do any of that stuff. He goes, but I can make a lot of money. And so, and it was funny because, he's like, I can't do any of that stuff.
Yeah.
And so he actually valued his gifting much lower than the people who were preaching, teaching, singing, all that kind of stuff. But the one thing that he had to give was he was a giver, and he could make money. And
that's such a healthy, appropriate response too, because it is a gift. Giving money, giving to the poor and needy when they need money, that is a great gift, and it's very necessary. But I think he was on the right track.
I do too.
That it's not as good as having the gift of teaching, the gift of healing, the gift of prophecy, all of these other gifts.
Right.
And I think that's what James is saying here. Not that having money is a bad thing, but just don't let it get to your head. Because whereas the world values being rich as like the most important or one of the most important things in the church, it's one of those bottom gifts.
Well, and he didn't even look at it as if it's my wealth. He looked at it as if this belongs to God. So this is the gift that I have to give to God, which I loved. I mean, that was an incredible thing.
So what do those two mindsets look like? Where's the difference? How do we make sure, my money versus this is a gift God has given me for the church? What's the difference? How do we view our wealth as a gift from God?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty easy to see when somebody's wealthy and their wealth is all about them. Or somebody else who's wealthy, but their wealth is for another reason. Give to the church. Yeah, I mean, I think that's true and important. But I think poor people should give to the church too.
Yeah.
So give to the church, yes, but give to the world. Some people they just make sure that what they have, it's almost a conduit that flows out instead of just flowing in to fill up their reservoir.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's so important to view it that way as, hey, this money isn't mine. I'm going to give to the church, give to those around me who need it, because like this passage says, he will pass away like a wildfire, for the sun rises with scorching heat and withers the plant. And that's so true. We cannot take, and I won't get too detailed, but I lost a loved one recently. In reflecting over that week and the thoughts that were going through my head, it really, we say things, but sometimes it's, feeling it, going through it ourselves is what makes it real.
Yeah.
And it felt real knowing that, hey, during his last days, the number in his banking and checking account, whether it had 6 zeros or 1 zero, made no difference. He took none of that with him when he passed.
Sure.
It didn't matter, like, at all. And that's what this verse is talking about. We cannot take our money with us when we die.
Yeah.
Like we just can't. And we fool ourselves into either not thinking about death, into thinking we can take our money with us when we die, trying to protect ourselves, live long lives by, have you seen, what is it? The people that freeze themselves with a lot of money. Cryogenics,
Yeah.
Trying to avoid death. You can't escape death. Nobody can.
Yeah.
And that's what this passage is saying. You are going to die and your money's going to leave you. And so just be aware of that.
Yeah,
and
you think you're all that, but you're going to die.
Yeah, I mean, that's the truth. And so, again, it's a humble position. It's a lower gift.
But, okay, verse 9, believers who are poor have something to boast about. What in the world is that? What do you have to boast about? You're poor. You're struggling to make ends meet. You're having to shop at Goodwill instead of at, well, here it's Walmart because that's all we got. But you're having to shop. You don't get the designer clothes, or you get the used designer clothes. What do you have to boast about?
I think what you have to boast about is you're closer to the heart of Jesus.
What?
In the sense that I think you're more easily able to understand Jesus. So we turn to Luke and we turn to the Sermon on the Plain, and Luke, Jesus says, "Blessed are the poor." Period. Like literally, just blessed are the poor. I think there's something about the fact that our Savior Jesus, he was poor, he was homeless, he was thrown out of his hometown. People were constantly trying to kill him. Like he was killed by Rome in one of the most brutal ways possible. Like Jesus did not live a cush life. He lived a very rough life. And so you are, I think this is sort of what the passage alludes to. I don't know. God is close to everyone. But I think there's a reason that Jesus hung out with who he hung out with, why he picked all the disciples and didn't go to the synagogue and picked all the smart, rich kids. No, he went and picked the disciples. There's a reason that he hung out in all these small towns in Nazareth and didn't just go to all the big cities. Yeah, so I want to hesitate. I know saying like,
No,
if you're poor, you're closer to the heart of God, but there's an element of truth in that statement.
It's a bold statement, and it's shocking, and it might be true. I think about some people that I've known who've had nothing, but even though they've had nothing, the one thing they've had is an incredible joy. I think, there have been times when we've done some work in Mexico and took our entire group. I think we had 12 kids and went to this one home, and this poor family fed us. And they had nothing to feed us, and yet they gave us everything they had with incredible joy. And it's like, wow, I don't even understand. I felt bad for taking anything, but they were giving it with so much joy. And I think there's something too, like you were just saying, you have to rely on God.
Yeah, and it's so hard to rely on God when we have money.
Yeah.
When we're not being persecuted by our government. Like I've thought this before too, the church in China right now, where, if you're Christian, you can get in big trouble, right?
Sure.
We're soft compared to them. I really think we're so soft compared to the church in China. And they have so much more in common with the early church, and their faith is tested because it's sort of like, so I went to being an Air Force kid.
Which was last week. We talked about your faith being tested in.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. About it being tested and how it's so important for it to be tested. I went to charter school, homeschool, private school, public school growing up with my dad's in the Air Force, so we moved around a lot. And there was something about going to a private school where everyone was Christian. It was a Christian private school. I'm telling you, it was a sea of gray. Like, yeah, everyone's a Christian, but not walking the walk at all, because it was just assumed everyone's a Christian. Whereas when you're at a public school, it is black and white. You are either following Jesus or you are not. And it's very explicit. The line is sort of drawn because you get made fun of in a public school. In the private school, it's easy to be a Christian. I feel like that's sort of, at least sort of related to this in the sense that persecution, rough circumstances, they cause you to fully rely on God. You have to choose, am I in or out? Sort of like we were talking about last week. Where does your loyalty lie, right? And loyalty doesn't, when life is great, loyalty doesn't come into question. But when rubber hits the road, pedal hits the metal, bad circumstances come, and your loyalty gets tested, that's when you know, do I have a faith or do I not have a faith?
Yeah. I would never wish poverty on anyone.
No.
Because poverty is awful.
It is, yeah. And we don't want to glorify it either.
No, we don't want to wish it on people. We don't want to glorify it. But there's something that we can't measure because we're human, and we don't understand that sometimes poverty can actually be a gift to us. Yeah. and that sounds weird. So it sounds like, well, it sounds like we need to, take away his pay kind of thing. That's not what I'm trying to imply. But there's some kind of a spiritual, I don't know, maybe something happens to people in poverty, and they understand elements of God that people who are wealthy cannot.
100%. And not just material poverty, but I would say spiritual poverty, emotional poverty, relational poverty, where those who've struggled with addiction, those who've battled against demons, they're going to have a more deep richness of faith than someone who hasn't. So I think it goes all across the board. We're not just talking about material poverty, but also just like how Luke says poor and Matthew says poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. It's a both and. That God is closest to the brokenhearted, to the poor in spirit, to all those who have less. God flips the table and reverses. And I would say, I think a huge takeaway too is in missions. A lot of times, what we've seen from missions, and I think things are changing for the better in the world of missions right now. But if we go over to a country where it's more people in poverty, and because we have money, there's this assumption that we know more about God. And so we're speaking, we're the ones, I've heard from many mission trips, and I've gone on one sort of, but not really. Many mission trips where, you travel and you're the ones preaching, you're the ones speaking. Because there's this assumption that we're bringing Jesus to these people. Completely false. If we take this seriously, we should go and then listen and shut up and be quiet. Because if they are living, like you said in your experience, where you experienced this family that had nothing that fed you, they know something about God
Yeah.
that we should listen up to.
That's good. That's
you know,
good.
that we should be quiet and listen. So I think that there's something to be said about that too.
So one other thought. I know that when you're rich, it's harder to be generous on the same level. I mean, it's easy to be generous when I have plenty and I've got all of and it's sitting aside. This is mine.
Yeah.
But I'm going to give you a little bit. Now I feel like I've been generous because I gave more than all those people could give.
Yeah.
But the reality is, I could have given to the point of sacrifice, like they gave a little and they gave to a point of sacrifice. I gave a little and I didn't even notice it.
It's about the percentage given, not the dollar amount. And I mean, Jesus told his disciples this with the poor woman that put 2 coins in.
She gave everything she had.
Everything. Yeah.
Right.
But those 2 coins were nothing compared to a rich Pharisee who donated a lot. But that doesn't matter. Like I love that you brought that up. It's so important. It's harder to give a lot when you're rich.
Yeah, yeah, it is. Wow. It is. In fact, you know, if you look at giving trends, the people who have less tend to give percentage-wise, give more. It's just the way we are. I think when we have a lot, we're much more likely. We're much more likely to not be, or to think of our generosity as something more than it really is.
Awesome. So that wraps up verses 9 through 11. So I'm really looking forward to next week when we could go from verse 12 on.
Yeah, sounds good.
Monday matters.
Yeah, thanks. And thanks for, let us know what you're thinking about, this verse by verse stuff in the comments, and we'll try to.
In our emails.
In our emails, yeah. We'll see where it goes. Yeah, thanks.